It was a day the world held its breath. December 21st, 2012. Headlines screamed about the end of days, fueled by ancient prophecies and Hollywood blockbusters. People stockpiled supplies, others prayed, and some even partied like there was no tomorrow. The Mayan calendar, an intricate masterpiece of timekeeping carved in stone thousands of years ago, had supposedly marked this date as the end of all things. But when the sun rose on December 22nd, life went on as usual. No cataclysmic earthquakes, no cosmic collisions, just another morning. So what really happened? Why did so many believe the world would end, and why were they so wrong? The truth is far more fascinating than the myths. The Mayans weren't predicting doom, they were tracking time in cycles so vast they stretched beyond human imagination. Their calendar wasn't a countdown to destruction but a vision of cosmic renewal, a celestial reset button. But somewhere along the way their message got twisted. Modern fear turned an ancient insight into a global panic, and the real story, the brilliance of Mayan astronomy, their understanding of time's rhythms, was buried under doomsday hype. Today, we're unraveling that mystery. We'll travel back to the heart of Mayan civilization, where priests charted the stars with jaw-dropping precision, where time wasn't just measured but woven into the fabric of existence. You'll discover how their calendar actually worked, why December 21st wasn't an ending at all, and what this moment truly symbolized to the people who created it. This isn't just about debunking myths, it's about rediscovering one of humanity's most sophisticated cosmic clocks. So let's step into the world of the Maya, where time moves in sacred circles, and the end is always just a new beginning. To understand why December 21st held such significance, we have to step into the minds of the Maya, a civilization that saw time not as a straight line but as a living, breathing spiral. While other ancient cultures tracked days and seasons, the Maya mapped time on a scale that still leaves modern astronomers in awe. At their peak, their cities were cosmic observatories, with temples built to align perfectly with solstices and equinoxes. Their priests didn't just study the stars, they conversed with them, using math so precise it could predict eclipses centuries in advance. But their true genius lay in how they layered time like an intricate clockwork. The Mayan calendar wasn't just one system, it was three interlocking wheels turning in harmony. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle, guided rituals and agriculture. The Hob, a 365-day solar year, kept their planting seasons in sync, and the long count, their masterpiece, stretched over millennia, marking eras like chapters in a cosmic story. Together, these cycles created a rhythm so exact they could pinpoint celestial events down to the minute. This obsession with cycles wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. For the Maya, time was a sacred echo. Each cycle carried the weight of history, repeating patterns of creation and rebirth. Kings ascended thrones on dates mirroring their ancestors' triumphs. Temples were rebuilt in alignment with celestial resets. Even wars were timed to the stars. When their long count calendar ended in 2012, it wasn't a prophecy of doom. It was the completion of a 5,125-year journey, a moment to honor the past and prepare for the next great cycle. What modern doomsayers missed was the Mayas' profound optimism. Their calendar didn't predict an end, it celebrated resilience. Like the sun rising after the longest night, their cosmology taught that every ending seeds a new beginning. So when December 21st arrived, it wasn't a countdown to oblivion. It was a reminder time doesn't destroy, it transforms. At the heart of the Maya's cosmic vision was the long count, a calendar so expansive it could map time across millennia. Think of it like an odometer for the universe, tracking not just years but grand cycles of creation. Unlike our linear Gregorian calendar, the long count measured time in nested units, each with its own spiritual weight. The smallest building block was the kin, a single day. 20 kins made a yuanal, their version of a month. 18 yuanals formed a ton, a 360-day year that anchored their agricultural life. But here's where it gets astonishing. 20 tons became a katun, roughly 20 of our years. Stack 20 katuns and you'd reach a baktun, a 400-year epoch that served as a cornerstone of Mayan history. These weren't just numbers, they were sacred markers. When a baktun turned over, it was like the universe taking a deep breath, the completion of one era and the dawn of another. Monumental events, coronations, temple dedications, even the rise and fall of cities were timed to these cycles. For example, the Maya celebrated the 9th Baktun's end in the year 534 by erecting stelae, stone pillars narrating their king's divine connections. To them, these transitions weren't endings but cosmic alignments, moments when the threads of past and future intertwined. The infamous 2012 date marked the close of the 13th Baktun, a 5,125-year cycle. Western pop culture spun this as apocalyptic, but the Maya saw it differently. Their inscriptions describe it as a bulak kayatun, a time of renewal when the gods would re-enter the world. Imagine it like New Year's Eve on a celestial scale, fireworks of symbolism, not destruction. Temples at sites like Palenque even encoded future dates beyond 2012, proving they expected life to continue. The long count didn't stop, it rolled forward just as winter gives way to spring. What's truly humbling is how they built this system without telescopes or computers. By observing Venus's cycles, solar eclipses, and even the wobble of Earth's axis, Mayan astronomers calculated time with an error margin smaller than modern satellite measurements. Their Dresden Codex, a bark paper book surviving centuries of humidity, contains Venus tables accurate to 2 hours over 500 years. This wasn't superstition, it was science intertwined with spirituality, a reminder that time itself was a living force to be honored, not feared. So when we hear Mayan prophecy, we should think less about doom and more about their breathtaking insight, that civilizations like stars have seasons. The long count's message wasn't of finality but of resilience, a call to mark our place in the cosmos and prepare for the next turn of the wheel. December 21st, 2012 wasn't a cliffhanger, it was a cosmic page-turner. For the Maya, the completion of the 13th Baktun wasn't about fire and brimstone, it was a moment of recalibration, like the universe hitting refresh. Picture their long count as an immense celestial clock with gears of different sizes, some ticking off days, others marking epochs. When the largest gear, the Baktun, completed its 5,125-year rotation, it didn't trigger an alarm. It simply signaled the clock was ready to start its next grand cycle. This perspective gets lost in translation when we impose modern anxieties onto ancient wisdom. Western doomsday hype latched onto the idea of an end, but Mayan inscriptions tell a different story. Take the Tortuguero monument, a stone slab from the 7th century that mentions the 2012 date. Instead of predicting chaos, it describes the event as the return of a god associated with creation and renewal. Another carving at Palenque references future ceremonies thousands of years beyond 2012, proof the Maya envisioned time stretching far beyond this milestone. What makes their view even more remarkable is how they celebrated these transitions. When a Baktun ended, cities hosted spectacular ceremonies, dances in plazas, offerings of jade and cocoa, kings donning jaguar pelts to channel divine energy. These weren't last hurrahs, they were spiritual investments in the next cycle. Archaeologists find evidence of this in places like Quirigá, where rulers erected towering stelae to honor the 8th Baktun's completion in the year 435. The monuments didn't mourn an ending, they proclaimed continuity, linking past glories to future legacies. The real irony, the Maya likely wouldn't recognize our apocalyptic interpretations. Their cosmology revolved around balance, not obliteration. Just as their calendar wove together solar years and sacred cycles, they saw existence as an endless dance of complementary forces, light and dark, growth and decay, all necessary for harmony. The 13th Baktun's completion was simply a moment to realign with that rhythm. Modern fears turned a nuanced spiritual concept into a sensational headline, but the truth is far more beautiful. The Maya didn't fear time. They revered it. The Doomsday frenzy around 2012 wasn't born in ancient temples. It was manufactured in Hollywood studios and sensationalized by tabloid headlines. Long before December 21st arrived, blockbuster films like 2012, starring John Cusack, painted vivid scenes of earthquakes splitting continents and tsunamis swallowing cities. These images didn't just entertain, they rewrote history, replacing the Maya's nuanced cosmology with a disaster movie script. Suddenly, an entire civilization's spiritual legacy was reduced to a clickbait punchline: the end is near. Media outlets piled on, cherry-picking fragments of Mayan lore while ignoring the full picture. Tabloids ran stories about NASA confirming planetary collisions that never existed. Conspiracy theorists claimed hidden planets like Nibiru were hurtling toward Earth, despite astronomers debunking the myth repeatedly. Even reputable news platforms gave airtime to fringe voices, amplifying fear because catastrophe sells. The result, a global feedback loop where misinformation drowned out scholarly voices. People emptied supermarket shelves, built bunkers, or flocked to sacred sites like Mexico's Chichen Itza, hoping to survive a cataclysm the Maya never predicted. What makes this distortion so revealing is how it mirrors centuries of Western culture imposing its anxieties onto indigenous wisdom. The Maya didn't vanish because they foresaw doom. Their civilization declined due to drought and political strife. Yet pop culture resurrected them as mystical doomsayers, erasing their real achievements. Imagine if future civilizations reduced Einstein's theories to "that guy who warned about black holes eating Earth." The irony is palpable. A culture that revered cyclical renewal was framed as heralding linear destruction. Archaeologists and Mayan elders repeatedly clarified the truth, but their voices struggled against the roar of sensationalism. Dr. David Stewart, a leading epigrapher, spent years explaining that the long count's end was like a car's odometer rolling over, a reset, not a crash. Meanwhile, Guatemalan Maya priest Alejandro Cirillo Perez lamented how outsiders stole our calendar and turned it into a horror story. The real prophecy here wasn't about Earth's demise, it was about how easily modern society confuses mystery with menace, transforming ancestral knowledge into a commodity for headlines and box office profits. In the end, the greatest disaster wasn't celestial, it was cultural. The 2012 hype exposed our tendency to weaponize the unknown, to spin mythology into marketing. But it also offered a lesson. When we listen to ancient voices on their own terms, we don't find prophecies of doom. We find invitations to witness time as a sacred spiral, to see endings as doorways, and to remember that fear is often just misunderstanding dressed up as certainty. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Mayan manuscripts, reads like a love letter to the cosmos, filled with star charts, eclipse tables, and rituals for aligning earthly life with celestial rhythms. Not a single page warns of fire raining from the sky or planets colliding. Instead, it details how to plant corn when Venus rises or performs ceremonies during solstices. This sacred text, along with monuments like the Tablet of the Sun at Palenque, reveals a civilization obsessed with harmony, not horror. Yet somewhere between Spanish conquistadors burning Mayan libraries and 21st century movie studios hunting for plotlines, the truth got lost in translation. Modern Mayan prophecies are a Frankenstein's monster of misunderstandings. Take the infamous galactic alignment myth, the idea that on December 21, 2012, the Sun would align with the Milky Way's center, triggering chaos. While astronomers confirmed the alignment did occur as it does every 26,000 years, Mayan texts never linked it to catastrophe. In fact, their astronomers saw such alignments as spiritual portals, moments when the boundary between worlds grew thin. The real distortion came from authors like José Arguelles, whose 1987 book, The Mayan Factor, reinterpreted the calendar through New Age mysticism, inventing cosmic deadlines the Maya never endorsed. Even the Tortuguero monument, often misquoted as predicting doomsday, tells a different story when read fully. Its inscription describes the 13th Baktun's completion as the return of Balon Yacht, a deity associated with war and creation, but also with transitions and renewal. Like a season changing or a king passing his crown, this was about transformation, not termination. Meanwhile, fabricated prophecies circulated online, claiming the Maya foresaw pole shifts or solar flares. These myths crumble under scrutiny. No surviving carvings or codices mention such events. The closest thing to an apocalypse in Mayan lore is the Popol Vuh's account of previous worlds being remade, but even that portrays destruction as a necessary step toward rebirth, much like forest fires clear space for new growth. The heart of the confusion lies in cultural collision. Western thought often views time linearly, a march from point A to B with definitive endings, but the Maya saw time as a series of overlapping spirals where history rhymed more than it repeated. Their calendars were tools for syncing human lives with these grand patterns, not crystal balls for disaster. When modern doomsayers cherry-picked Mayan symbols while ignoring their context, it was like taking a single note from a symphony and calling it the entire song. Archaeologists have spent decades correcting the record. At sites like Kapon and Tikal, inscriptions celebrate future dates thousands of years beyond 2012, proving the Maya envisioned time stretching far beyond that milestone. Even their mythology underscores this. Their cosmos had already survived multiple cycles of creation. The lesson here isn't about fearing endings, but understanding their role in a larger tapestry. Where pop culture saw apocalypse, the Maya saw opportunity, a chance to realign with the universe's eternal rhythm. Their greatest prophecy wasn't about the world ending. It was about humanity remembering how to keep time with the stars. That alignment on December 21, 2012, where the sun crossed what astronomers call the dark rift of the Milky Way, wasn't just a celestial coincidence. For the Maya, this region of the galaxy held profound spiritual weight. They saw it as the cosmic womb, the place where their creator gods emerged. Modern stargazers call it the galactic center, a dense cluster of stars 26,000 light-years away. But here's what most doomsday theories got wrong. The Maya never tied this alignment to catastrophe. Instead, their carvings suggest it marked a moment of sacred communion when the veil between worlds grew thin. The science behind the alignment is staggering even without apocalyptic hype. Every winter solstice, the sun appears to drift against the backdrop of the Milky Way. But due to Earth's slow wobble, a motion called precession, the sun's position shifts by about 1 degree every 72 years. It takes nearly 26,000 years for the solstice sun to return to the same spot. December 21, 2012 was special because the sun aligned precisely with the dark rift, a dust-obscured lane cutting through the galaxy's center. Think of it like the hands of a cosmic clock finally overlapping after millennia of turning. Mayan astronomers tracked this phenomenon with eerie precision. Murals at Zoltan, Guatemala, depict Venus cycles and eclipse tables stretching 7,000 years into the future. Their Dresden Codex includes charts predicting lunar eclipses down to the hour. Yet nowhere in these records is this alignment labeled as doomsday. Instead, glyphs at sites like Palenque describe it as a time of changeovers, when deities like the maize god would renew their gifts to humanity. One inscription even frames it as the moment a king's soul would journey through the dark rift to join his ancestors, a spiritual homecoming, not destruction. The confusion stems from how modern astrology grafted its own fears onto Mayan science. In the 1970s, writers like Terence McKenna popularized the idea of the galactic alignment as an energy shift, a concept alien to Mayan texts. By 2012, the myth snowballed into claims that the alignment would trigger solar storms or gravitational chaos. NASA had to publicly debunk theories about killer flares or planetary collisions. Meanwhile, Mayan elders like Hunbat's men clarified that their ancestors saw the event as an invitation to realign with cosmic cycles, akin to resetting a compass, not detonating a bomb. What's lost in this noise is the sheer beauty of Mayan astronomy. They didn't just observe the dark rift, they wove it into their architecture. At Capon, a stairway of hieroglyphs mimics the Milky Way's path, with the dark rift represented as a doorway. In Yucatan, the pyramid at Chichen Itza casts a serpent shadow during equinoxes, symbolizing the feathered god Kukulkan descending to Earth. These weren't designs of doom, they were celestial maps guiding people to live in harmony with the universe's rhythms. The galactic center theory reveals less about Mayan prophecy and more about our own hunger for drama. We turned their celestial calendar into a countdown clock, their spiritual portals into disaster scenarios. But the real wonder isn't in imagining an ending, it's in grasping how the Maya saw time as a conversation with the stars, where every alignment was a chance to listen. While cable news channels hyped doomsday scenarios in 2012, an entirely different story unfolded in the highlands of Guatemala and the jungles of Mexico. There, contemporary Maya communities gathered not to mourn an ending, but to celebrate a cosmic birthday. In village squares and ancient ceremonial sites, elders led rituals that had echoed across centuries, burning sacred copal resin, offering maize and cocoa to the earth, and chanting the same prayers their ancestors spoke when the long count began. Far from a global catastrophe, December 21st was a homecoming, a moment to reaffirm their unbroken bond with time itself. Take the town of Santiago Atitlan, where Tziyutujil Maya priests dressed in hand-woven huipiles performed the Palo Volador ceremony, a dizzying dance where men descend from a 50-foot pole tied by ropes spiraling like planets in orbit. This ritual, older than the Aztec Empire, mirrored the Maya's view of time as a sacred wheel turning endlessly. Meanwhile, in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Yucatec Maya families built makeshift altars with 13 tiers, one for each baktun piled with squash blossoms, honey, and hand-rolled cigars. As children played among the offerings, elders explained how the date marked a change of sun, not its death, using the same metaphor their grandparents had taught them. The contrast with Western panic couldn't have been starker. At Chichen Itza, thousands of tourists clustered to witness the serpent shadow slither down El Castillo Pyramid, a phenomenon that occurs every equinox, not just in 2012. But while visitors snapped photos, local Maya quietly gathered at nearby cenotes, sinking jade beads into the sacred wells as gifts to the rain god Chak. For them, the solstice wasn't about spectacle, it was about reciprocity. As one Quechua elder told anthropologists, the world doesn't end when you repay a debt. It renews. What outsiders missed was the sheer normalcy of these rites. In Zinacanton, Chiapas, Mayan women spent the day weaving intricate patterns into huipiles garments encoding cosmic symbols passed down since pre-Columbian times. Their designs mirrored the very star maps their ancestors tracked, proof that the calendar's end was just another stitch in an unbroken tapestry. Even the much-hyped apocalyptic monument at Tortuguero was contextualized by living Maya. Lacandon forest dwellers who still use the long count for planting cycles laughed at doomsday claims. As Elder K. in Garsha noted, you don't throw away a machete because it completes 13 harvests. You honor its service and keep working. Perhaps the most poignant celebration happened quietly in the Cuyumarcaj ruins, once the capital of the Quechua Maya. There, amid crumbling temples, modern-day priests lit 13 candles, one for each completed baktun, and placed them atop a stone carved with the Maya glyph for infinity. The flame that flickered that night wasn't a funeral pyre for the world, but a beacon for the next 5,000 years. In that moment, the true prophecy of 2012 revealed itself, not an ending foretold by ancients, but a beginning kept alive by their descendants. Where the world saw fear, the Maya saw faith. Faith that time, like their traditions, would endure. If you walked into any academic conference on Mayan studies in 2012, you wouldn't find panic, you'd find eye rolls. Leading Mayanists like Dr. David Stewart, the archaeologist who deciphered key portions of the Tortuguero monument, spent years correcting headlines with a simple truth: the Maya never predicted the end of the world. Stewart's peer-reviewed research, along with work by scholars like Dr. Marcello Canuto and Dr. William Saturno, reveals a glaring gap between Hollywood's apocalypse and the actual archaeological record. Take the infamous Tortuguero inscription itself, often misquoted as a doomsday warning. Stewart's translations show it mentions the 13th baktun's completion will herald the descent of Balon Yacht, a deity linked to conflict but also to renewal and sacred transitions. There's no mention of global destruction, just a ritual moment akin to changing ceremonial guard. Even more telling, the same monument references events planned for the year 4078, proving the Maya envisioned time stretching far beyond 2012. Epigraphers like Dr. Stephen Houston stress how Western media cherry-picked symbols while ignoring context. For instance, the Maya frequently depicted cosmic monsters like the starry deer crocodile, a celestial being that symbolized chaos, yes, but also rebirth. Modern doomsayers latched onto the chaos part, ignoring how these motifs appeared in agricultural rites celebrating seasonal cycles. As Houston notes, you might as well claim the ball game at Chichen Itza was predicting soccer wars because it involved competition. Meanwhile, archaeologists like Dr. Lisa Lucero point to physical evidence refuting doomsday claims. At sites like Tikal and Capon, stelae carved centuries before 2012 reference dates thousands of years in the future. The famous Pakal, the great sarcophagus lid at Palenque, it includes calculations reaching the year 4772. You don't carve your tomb with future dates if you think the world's ending, Lucero dryly observes. Even the Dresden Codex's so-called destruction pages don't depict apocalypse, they outline weather patterns for planting maize. The academic consensus isn't just about debunking myths, it's about reclaiming the Maya's intellectual legacy. Dr. Canuto's work at La Corona uncovered a 2012 reference describing the date as a royal anniversary, not a cataclysm. And Dr. Saturno's discoveries at San Bartolo revealed murals showing deities nurturing corn sprouts, underscoring the Maya's focus on cyclical growth. As Stewart puts it, their genius wasn't in predicting endings, it was in creating a calendar so precise we're still unraveling its layers today. What emerges from these scholars isn't just correction, it's respect. The Maya didn't fear time, they mastered it. Their calendars weren't crystal balls but cosmic libraries, encoding knowledge of eclipses, planetary motions, and agricultural cycles with staggering accuracy. When epigraphers dismiss doomsday claims, they're not just setting the record straight, they're honoring a civilization that saw time as a garden to tend, not a bomb to dread. The real prophecy of 2012, that misunderstanding can eclipse brilliance but scholarship, like the Maya's sacred cycles, always brings the truth back around. The fear that gripped the world in 2012 wasn't a blip in history, it was the latest verse in an ancient repeating chorus. Long before the Mayan calendar became a doomsday meme, civilizations across time have projected their anxieties onto cosmic deadlines. Take the year 1000, when European Christians braced for the biblical end of days as the millennium turned. monasteries overflowed with penitents, farmers abandoned their fields, and crowds gathered on hilltops waiting for angels to descend. When dawn broke on January 1st, 1001, life carried on just as it would 1,000 years later in 2012. The 17th century had its own phantom apocalypse, the year 1666. With its triple sixes echoing the biblical number of the beast, Londoners were convinced disaster loomed. Pamphlets warned of fire, plague, and the Antichrist's rise. Ironically, their fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy when the Great Fire of London razed the city that September, not by divine wrath, but a baker's oven left burning. Even then, the world didn't end. London rebuilt, and the date faded into history as a cautionary tale about confirmation bias. Fast forward to the 1990s, when the Y2K bug had everyone convinced computers would trigger global collapse. Media outlets breathlessly reported that on January 1, 2000, banking systems would fail, planes would fall from the sky, and nuclear plants would melt down as clocks reset to 1900. Survivalists stockpiled canned goods, tech firms scrambled to patch code, and governments formed emergency task forces. When midnight struck, the most catastrophic event was a few malfunctioning parking meters. The real threat wasn't the calendar, it was our tendency to mistake glitches for Armageddon. What ties these episodes together isn't just failed predictions, it's the human psyche is craving for narrative closure. Psychologists call it eschatological anxiety, the unease we feel when faced with life's unpredictability. Inventing deadlines, whether Mayan baktuns or religious prophecy, gives chaos a countdown. Historians note how these panics often spike during times of upheaval. The Black Death fueled medieval doomsday cults, while Cold War tensions birthed 1980s nuclear paranoia. Even the 2012 hype coincided with global recession and climate fears, proof that we don't just predict endings, we conjure them to make sense of our present. But here's the twist, these failed prophecies often leave lasting gifts. The Y2K scare forced tech upgrades that revolutionized cybersecurity. London's fire birthed modern urban planning. And the Mayan calendar myth, it introduced millions to a civilization's astronomical genius, sparking new research into their star maps. Apocalyptic fears, it seems, are less about the world ending and more about humanity growing, each panic leaving behind tools, knowledge, or stories that help us face the next uncertainty. The lesson isn't that prophets were wrong, it's that survival is our oldest habit. From Babylonian omen tablets to TikTok conspiracy theories, the pattern holds. We keep rehearsing for doomsday because deep down we're built to outlast it. The Maya understood this better than most. Their calendar didn't count down to oblivion, it celebrated humanity's stubborn dance with time, a rhythm that continues long after the prophets fall silent. So the next time a new end date trends online, remember, history's greatest prophecy isn't about finality, it's about our endless, messy, magnificent resilience. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they didn't just wage war on Mayan cities, they declared war on time itself. Friars like Diego de Landa, who famously burned thousands of Mayan codices in 1562, saw their calendars as heresy, a rival to Christian cosmology. Temples were toppled, scribes were silenced, and the intricate bark paper books containing centuries of astronomical knowledge went up in flames. Yet despite this systematic campaign to erase indigenous wisdom, the Mayan calendar refused to die. It slipped through the cracks of colonial rule, hidden in plain sight, etched onto the walls of remote caves, whispered in village rituals, even camouflaged within Catholic feast days. This wasn't just survival, it was resistance in its purest form, the quiet insistence that some clocks cannot be broken. Archaeologists have pieced together how the calendar endured. In Guatemala's highlands, Maya communities kept tracking the 260-day Tzolk'in cycle under the guise of Christian saints' days. A day honoring the maize god might surface as a festival for Saint Isidore, the patron of farmers. Meanwhile, in Yucatan, elders memorized long count calculations and passed them down orally, encoding them in weaving patterns or children's counting games. The most astonishing evidence comes from a 17th century church in Chiapas, where researchers recently uncovered frescoes beneath peeling plaster constellations painted in the exact layout of the Dresden Codex's star charts, hidden by Mayan artisans who'd been forced to build the very walls meant to suppress their culture. The colonial assault on Mayan timekeeping wasn't just about religion, it was about power. By dismantling the calendar, Spain sought to sever the Maya from their history, their agriculture, even their identity. The calendar wasn't merely a tool, it was the backbone of their worldview, dictating when to plant crops, when to marry, when to wage war. But the Maya adapted with breathtaking ingenuity. When paper was forbidden, they carved almanacs into gourds. When rituals were banned, they folded sacred dates into Christian ceremonies. In Solala, elders still recount how their ancestors would misplace Catholic prayer books during key Tzolk'in dates, forcing priests to reschedule Mass, a subtle sabotage that kept the old rhythms alive. What makes this survival even more remarkable is how fragments of the calendar resurfaced centuries later. In 1952, a Guatemalan farmer plowing his field unearthed a broken stela covered in long count glyphs, proof that someone had buried it to save it from destruction. Decades after that, linguists working with Quechua Maya healers discovered they'd preserved eclipse prediction tables verbatim across 500 years, despite no written records surviving. And in 2012, when the world obsessed over a distorted version of their calendar, contemporary Maya scholars finally regained access to colonial archives in Seville, Spain, where they found scribes had secretly transcribed Mayan dates alongside Christian ones, creating a hidden bridge between worlds. The true prophecy of the Mayan calendar wasn't about the end of time, it was about time's refusal to end. While empires rose and fell, while libraries burned and languages were outlawed, this ancient system ticked on in the hands of midwives marking birth charts, farmers reading star-aligned planting guides, and children learning sacred numbers through bedtime stories. Colonialism tried to reset the clock, but the Maya had built something timeless, a calendar not of pages, but of memory, not of ink, but of blood. Its survival is a testament to the quiet power of cultural stubbornness, proving that some knowledge is so deeply woven into a people's bones, not even fire can erase it. Deep in the Guatemalan highlands, a grandmother kneels in her milpa, a cornfield sown the same way her ancestors planted for millennia. As her hands press seeds into the earth, she's not watching the weather app on a phone. She's reading the skies, guided by the same 260-day Tzolk'in calendar that once ruled Mayan empires. This isn't a reenactment or tourist display, it's daily life for millions of modern Maya, whose connection to their ancestral timekeeping never faded, not even when the world moved on from 2012's doomsday hype. In villages like Todos Santos Kachumatan, the calendar isn't history, it's survival. Farmers still consult daykeepers, spiritual guides who maintain intricate almanacs tracking each day's sacred energy. Certain dates are for planting beans, others for brewing ceremonial chocolate. A day marked as Kayat might be ideal for negotiating prices at market, while Biats signals the time to weave intricate textiles destined to carry cosmic symbols. These practices aren't superstition, they're a refined agricultural science. Researchers at the University of Guadalajara documented how Quechua Maya communities in Huehuetenango achieved 20% higher corn yields by syncing planting with specific Tzolk'in days, dates that align with microclimates and soil moisture levels Western agronomists often overlook. The calendar thrives in unexpected places. At a hospital in Quetzaltenango, midwives record births using both Gregorian and Tzolk'in dates, believing a child's day sign influences their personality and destiny, much like astrology, but rooted in 1,000 years of observational data. In Belize, Garifuna fishermen time lobster harvests to ancient lunar cycles preserved in Mayan almanacs, avoiding spawning seasons long before marine conservation laws existed. Even modern architects in Merida consult the Hob solar calendar when designing buildings, aligning windows with solstice sunbeams just as their ancestors did at Chichén Itzá. What's most striking is how seamlessly the old and new intertwine. Daykeepers like Tata Pedro Cruz in Sololá now share calendar insights via WhatsApp, sending daily energy readings to hundreds of subscribers. Young Maya coders in Guatemala City have developed apps that convert Gregorian dates to Tzolk'in, while hip-hop artists in Chiapas weave calendar glyphs into album art. At the annual Oxlajudge Baktun festival in Cabon, teenagers blend traditional fire ceremonies with drone light shows, proof that the calendar isn't a relic but a living language adapting to the 21st century. The real testament to its endurance, how it's reclaiming spaces once used to suppress it. In the shadow of Antigua's Spanish colonial churches, Maya priests now lead public ceremonies during Wayeb, the 5 nameless days at the Hob calendar's end. Where friars once burned codices, children now learn glyphs in bilingual schools. And every December 21st, crowds don't gather at ancient ruins to mourn a false apocalypse. They come to witness contemporary Maya artists projecting holographic star maps onto temple walls, merging laser precision with ancestral astronomy. This isn't nostalgia keeping the calendar alive, it's necessity. In a world of climate chaos and cultural homogenization, the Maya's time-tested rhythms offer stability. As daykeeper Lena Barrios explains while lighting copal resin in her courtyard, the calendar isn't about predicting the future, it's about remembering how to live. In that wisdom lies the true legacy of 2012, not an ending the world feared, but a beginning the Maya never stopped nurturing. Hollywood didn't just misinterpret the Mayan calendar, it weaponized it. When director Roland Emmerich's blockbuster 2012 hit theaters in 2009, it turned sacred cosmology into a demolition derby. Limousines outrunning collapsing skyscrapers, continents splitting like overripe fruit, and a CGI John Cusack piloting a plane through an exploding Yellowstone. These images didn't just entertain, they rewrote history for millions. The film grossed over $700 million worldwide by selling a lie that the Maya had predicted geological Armageddon. What's shocking isn't the artistic license, but how thoroughly fiction replaced fact. Surveys showed nearly 40% of audiences believed the movie's science had some basis in Mayan texts. The entertainment industry's distortion went deeper than popcorn spectacle. The History Channel aired specials like Decoding the Past, Mayan Doomsday Prophecy, blending shaky science with ominous narration. Discovery Channel's 2012 Apocalypse featured experts discussing rogue planets and pole shifts, theories no credible Mayan scholar endorsed. Even children's cartoons like Arthur did Halloween episodes about the Mayan apocalypse. This saturation created a feedback loop where fiction masqueraded as scholarship. Archaeologists became outnumbered by charlatans on talk shows. Bookstore shelves groaned with titles like The World Will End in 2012, The Mayan Warning. But the real cost wasn't just misinformation, it was cultural theft. Contemporary Maya watched their ancestors' legacy reduced to a punchline. In Guatemala, KH daykeeper Tata Pedro de la Cruz described seeing tourists arrive at sacred sites with 2012 movie merch, asking where they could hide from the coming tsunami. Meanwhile, Yucatec communities near Chichén Itzá faced disruptive crowds every December 21st, as spiritual ceremonies were drowned out by reality TV crews staging fake rituals. The insult cut deepest when Mayan elders realized outsiders were profiting from distortions of their cosmology, while their own schools lacked funding to teach authentic history. Some fought back with quiet defiance. The Maya Alliance of Oxlajudge Ajpop organized press conferences where spiritual guides held up genuine calendar glyphs next to Hollywood props, highlighting the gaps. Filmmakers like Maria Teresa Rodriguez documented Maya families watching Emrich's film in village squares, their laughter underscoring its absurdity. Perhaps the most powerful rebuttal came from the Lacandon Maya in Chiapas, who released a statement through Survival International. Our grandfathers measured time to plant corn and honor the gods, not to sell tickets. The irony, pop culture's obsession revealed more about modern anxieties than ancient prophecies. Disaster movies thrived during uncertain times. The 1970s had asteroid panics, the Cold War bred nuclear nightmares, and 2012's economic meltdowns made global collapse feel plausible. The Maya became accidental mirrors for our fears, but where Hollywood saw apocalypse, their actual legacy offers something radical, a vision of time as something to cooperate with, not flee from. The real end of the world wasn't in their calendar, it's in our habit of confusing storytelling with truth and spectacle with wisdom. What remains is a cautionary tale about cultural crossfire. When the cameras stopped rolling and December 22nd dawned, the Maya kept tracking their sacred cycles as they had for millennia. Their calendar didn't need vindication. It had already outlasted empires, invasions, and now Hollywood. The popcorn prophecies faded, but the deeper lesson endures. Civilizations that understand time as renewal, not ruin, tend to last. Among the wildest myths surrounding December 21st, 2012 was the claim that the Maya had secret knowledge of an approaching planet called Nibiru, a rogue world supposedly hurtling toward Earth to trigger cataclysm. Conspiracy forums buzzed with evidence ranging from distorted NASA images to fraudulent Sumerian translations, while self-proclaimed prophets claimed the Maya had been visited by extraterrestrials who warned them of this cosmic menace. Never mind that actual Mayan epigraphers found zero references to alien contact or killer planets in their surviving texts. The allure of a hidden apocalyptic truth proved stronger than facts. The Nibiru myth actually originated far from Mayan lands in the writings of fringe author Zecharia Sitchin, who claimed in the 1970s to have decoded ancient Sumerian tablets describing a mysterious 12th planet. Astronomers universally dismissed Sitchin's translations as fabricated, pointing out that Sumerians only knew 5 planets visible to the naked eye. But by 2012, the story had mutated, with conspiracy theorists grafting Nibiru onto the Mayan calendar like a Frankenstein's monster of misinformation. YouTube videos circulated showing secret NASA footage of Nibiru near the Sun, later exposed as lens flares or doctored images. Even the Hubble Space Telescope team issued a rare public rebuttal, stating, "No unknown planets are currently inbound to collide with Earth." Mayan source materials tell a very different story. The Dresden Codex's famous Venus tables, used to predict the planet's movements with near-perfect accuracy, contain no warnings of rogue celestial bodies. Stelae at Capon and Palink reference planets like Mars and Jupiter, but only as timekeeping markers, not threats. The closest thing to an alien reference in Mayan cosmology is the Popol Vuh account of creator gods arriving from the sea or stars, but these are clearly mythological, not literal descriptions of extraterrestrials. Anthropologist Dr. Carl Taub notes, the Maya didn't fear the cosmos, they mapped it meticulously. If Nibiru existed, their astronomers would have charted its orbit alongside Venus. The irony is how these conspiracy theories underestimated the Maya's actual astronomical prowess. At Zoltán, Guatemala, archaeologists uncovered a 9th-century mural showing precise calculations for lunar cycles stretching 7,000 years into the future, a feat requiring generations of observation. Modern planetarium software confirms their eclipse predictions were accurate to within minutes. These were scientists who tracked Mercury's retrograde motions and understood the precession of equinoxes centuries before Copernicus. The idea that they'd mistake a hypothetical planet for divine prophecy insults their legacy. What fueled the alien connection myth was a modern obsession with ancient astronauts. the debunked idea that advanced civilizations must have had extraterrestrial help. This bias ignores the Mayas' own innovations. Their concept of zero predated Europe's by nearly 1,000 years. Their observatories could pinpoint solstices using nothing but aligned doorways, and their bark paper books contained mathematical formulas rivaling those of Renaissance scholars. Rather than marvel at these achievements, conspiracy theorists imposed a sci-fi narrative onto a culture that didn't need aliens to explain the cosmos. They'd already decoded it on their own terms. The real revelation here isn't about hidden planets, it's about how easily fringe theories exploit gaps in public knowledge. When astronomers explained that no object as massive as Nibiru could approach undetected, its gravitational pull would already be disrupting orbits believers claimed a government cover-up. When Mayanists pointed out that long count inscriptions referenced dates beyond 2012, conspiracy circles dismissed them as elite puppets. This closed loop of paranoia reveals less about Mayan prophecy and more about our era's crisis of trust in expertise. Perhaps the most telling debunking came from Maya communities themselves. K.H. Elder Bielam Ajpu told reporters in 2012, "Our ancestors didn't waste stone carving lies about space monsters. They recorded when to plant corn and when the rains would come." In the end, the Nibiru myth says more about modern fantasies than ancient wisdom, the longing for a dramatic cosmic showdown rather than the patient, earthbound wisdom the Maya actually preserved. Their calendar didn't count down to invasion. It measured the enduring rhythm of seeds becoming harvests, of stars returning to their starting points, of time itself as a cycle too vast and too sacred to reduce to a Hollywood disaster plot. The human mind has a peculiar relationship with endings. We're simultaneously terrified and tantalized by them. There's something almost magnetic about doomsday predictions, a pull that transcends cultures and centuries. Psychologists point to deep-rooted cognitive biases that make apocalyptic thinking strangely comforting. One of the most powerful is our brain's tendency to prefer a bad explanation over no explanation at all, a phenomenon called the narrative fallacy. When faced with chaos, economic instability, climate disasters, political turmoil, the idea that it's all part of a grand, prophesied finale feels paradoxically soothing. It replaces random suffering with a plotline, substituting meaning for meaningless. This craving for patterns escalates in the digital age. Social media algorithms feed our confirmation bias, surrounding us with voices that echo our fears. If you once clicked on a post about the Mayan calendar's end date, suddenly your feed floods with conspiracy theories about pole shifts and solar flares. The more these ideas repeat, the more plausible they feel, a psychological trap known as the illusory truth effect. Before long, fringe claims gain the weight of common knowledge simply through sheer repetition. The irony is thick. Modern technology, designed to connect us to limitless information, instead funnels us into echo chambers where ancient prophecies get repackaged as viral clickbait. But the appeal runs deeper than cognitive shortcuts. Doomsday beliefs thrive during periods of collective anxiety because they offer a perverse kind of hope. Research shows that people drawn to apocalyptic predictions often feel disempowered in their daily lives, facing job insecurity, climate dread, or social fragmentation. The promise of an imminent reset button, whether through cosmic intervention or divine rapture, provides emotional relief. It's the ultimate escapist fantasy. No more rent payments, no more deadlines, just a clean slate. As one sociologist studying 2012 doomsday preppers noted, their bunkers weren't just stocked with canned goods, they were stocked with the dream of starting over. Modern apocalyptic thinking also reflects our fractured relationship with time. Ancient societies like the Maya viewed time as cyclical, a wheel turning through predictable seasons of growth and decay. But the industrialized world lives by linear time, a relentless march forward where progress is demanded and stasis feels like failure. doomsday fantasies allow an unconscious rebellion against this pressure. If the world ends, the to-do list vanishes, the stakes reset, the clock stops. In this light, the obsession with December 21st wasn't just about fearing an end. It was about longing for release from the treadmill of modern existence. Yet there's a twist to this psychological puzzle. Studies reveal that after predicted doomsdays pass without incident, believers often double down rather than abandon their convictions. This disconfirmation bias leads them to rationalize failures, claiming the catastrophe was spiritual rather than physical, or that collective prayer averted disaster. After 2012, some fringe groups argued the world did end, just invisibly, in some higher dimension. This mental gymnastics reveals the true function of apocalyptic beliefs. They're not about predicting the future, but about making sense of the present. When reality feels unstable, a dramatic narrative, even a terrifying one, becomes the glue holding fractured worldviews together. The digital age amplifies these tendencies to unprecedented levels. Online communities transform vague anxieties into elaborate mythologies, complete with their own jargon, heroes, and evidence. A tweet about strange weather becomes proof of planet Nibiru's approach. A glitchy NAS, a livestream, fuels claims of government cover-ups. The speed at which these narratives spread creates a new kind of apocalypse, one not carved in stone like the Mayan calendar, but coded in pixels and powered by shares. Unlike the Maya's carefully calculated cycles, today's doomsdays are crowdsourced, evolving in real time through the hive mind of collective anxiety. What makes this particularly modern is the commodification of catastrophe. Ancient prophets didn't monetize their predictions, but today's doomsday influencers hawk survival gear, paid newsletters, and apocalyptic retreats. The 2012 frenzy spawned a cottage industry of books, documentaries, and even themed vacations to sacred sites. This commercial layer adds another psychological hook, the sunk cost fallacy. Once someone invests money in preparing for the end, admitting it won't come feels like financial and emotional waste, so the belief persists, reinforced by dollar signs as much as dogma. At its core, the persistence of doomsday thinking holds up a mirror to humanity's deepest contradictions. We're creatures who crave both control and surrender, who worship progress but fantasize about wiping the board clean. The Maya understood time as something to harmonize with a dance where endings were always followed by new steps. Our modern psyche, however, often hears the music as a countdown. Perhaps the real prophecy hidden in 2012's hype wasn't about the world ending, but about revealing how desperately we need to rethink our relationship with time, uncertainty, and the stories we tell to make the chaos bearable. The frenzy around December 21, 2012 did something remarkable. It accidentally gifted the Maya their biggest cultural spotlight in centuries. What began as a doomsday circus ended up drawing global attention to the real treasures of Mayan civilization. Tourist arrivals in Mexico and Guatemala surged by nearly 40% in the years surrounding the event, but not everyone came for disaster selfies. Many visitors, initially lured by apocalyptic hype, found themselves stunned by the sophistication of Phalanx astronomical alignments or the intricate math encoded in Chichen Itza's staircases. Local guides reported a curious shift. By 2013, questions about the end of the world had given way to earnest inquiries about how the Maya tracked Venus or why their calendar had 3 interlocking systems. Academic institutions seized this momentum. Universities from Yale to the Universidad Autónoma de Yucatán launched joint archaeology projects, while tech companies partnered with linguists to digitize surviving codices. One breakthrough came when researchers at Brown University used multispectral imaging on a supposedly blank Mayan manuscript, revealing hidden astronomical tables beneath centuries of grime. Meanwhile, Google's 2012 Mayan Calendar Doodle linked to educational resources that got over 12 million clicks in a single day, funneling doomsday curiosity into legitimate scholarship. The irony is delicious. A myth about endings became the catalyst for rediscovering a culture's living legacy. The ripple effects reached contemporary Maya communities. Indigenous-led tourism collectives like Cacuxtl in Mérida saw bookings triple as travelers sought authentic encounters with daykeepers and weavers. Before 2012, outsiders saw us as relics, says KH guide Rosa Zaitumul. Now they ask to learn our calendar from elders, not Hollywood. Museums worldwide expanded. Mayan exhibits. The British Museum's 2013 Maya Secrets of Their Ancient World broke attendance records, while Guatemala opened the first national Mayan textile museum with surviving fragments of pre-Columbian fabrics. Even pop culture course-corrected. Video games like Civilization VI consulted epigraphers to accurately portray Mayan math, and children's shows began featuring Tzolk'in glyphs alongside ABCs. Perhaps the most profound shift was in academia. Before 2012, fewer than 20 universities offered dedicated Mayan studies programs. Today, that number has more than tripled, with institutions like the Universidad del Valle de Guatemala training a new generation of indigenous archaeologists. Digital projects like the Mayan Hieroglyphic Database now crowdsource translations from both scholars and Maya speakers, bridging gaps colonialism created. The Doomsday myth was like a lightning strike, reflects Dr. Ruud van Akkeren, an epigrapher working with Quechua communities. It burned away misconceptions, leaving fertile ground for real growth. Nowhere is this renewal more visible than in modern Maya art. Murals in Guatemala City blend ancient glyphs with street art, while musicians like Sara Kuricic set Popol Vuh verses to indie rock. Young Maya filmmakers are reclaiming their narrative too. Films like Ixcanol showcase calendar rituals without doomsday tropes. Even fashion has become a canvas. Designer Angel Sanchez's New York Fashion Week collection featured QR codes linking to Mayan star charts. This cultural renaissance carries a quiet defiance, proof that a civilization outlasts not just time, but misinterpretation. The legacy of 2012 isn't found in bunkers or Hollywood scripts, but in village schools where children learn to read glyphs, in apps preserving endangered Mayan languages, in the way the world finally paused its doomsday countdown to listen. What began as fear of an ending became unexpectedly a celebration of continuity. The Maya didn't need a prophecy to survive the modern world, they just needed the modern world to finally see them. And in that shift from apocalypse to appreciation, we find the real turning point, not a calendar's end, but a culture's long overdue rebirth. The Maya didn't just track time, they danced with it. Unlike the Western world's straight-line march from past to future, their cosmology envisioned time as a spinning wheel, where seasons, civilizations, and even cosmic events repeated in sacred rhythm. This wasn't some poetic metaphor, it was a practical philosophy woven into everything from crop rotations to temple construction. While modern societies obsess over infinite growth, burning through resources as if the planet were a disposable commodity, the Maya built their culture around a radical idea that time circles back and what you do today echoes into tomorrow's harvest. Take something as simple as their agricultural practices. Western farms often strip soil of nutrients with monocrops, relying on chemical fertilizers to force productivity. But Maya farmers still rotate fields with fallow periods, mirroring the Tzolk'in's 260-day cycle. They understood that land, like time, needs moments of rest to renew. Archaeologists studying ancient Maya cities like El Mirador found evidence of terraced gardens and forest management stretching back millennia. Proof they viewed ecosystems as partners in cyclical time, not infinite wells to drain. This mindset rippled through their entire society. While European kings commissioned portraits to immortalize their glory, Maya rulers carved stelae showing their reign as just one turn in a larger cycle. A king's triumph wasn't the climax of history, it was a note in a repeating song. Even their wars followed celestial timetables, often ritualized to coincide with Venus's appearances, more about symbolic renewal than territorial conquest. Compare that to modern conflicts fueled by the delusion that dominance equals progress, and the contrast stings. The environmental wisdom hidden in this cyclical view couldn't be more urgent today. Climate scientists warn we've overshot Earth's carrying capacity, yet governments still chase GDP growth like it's a holy grail. The Maya, though, designed cities like Tikal with reservoirs engineered to last centuries, aligning infrastructure with rainfall cycles they'd meticulously recorded. Their collapse wasn't the sudden doom pop culture loves. It was a gradual shift as prolonged drought tested their resilience. Even then, they adapted, moving populations rather than forcing a dying system. There's a lesson there for coastal cities clinging to seawalls as oceans rise. What's most striking is how their calendar itself models sustainability. The long counts baktuns, those sprawling 400-year cycles, forced planners to think in scales beyond individual lifespans. Modern corporations can't see past quarterly earnings, but Maya architects laid stones knowing they wouldn't see the temple completed. That long gaze shaped everything from soil conservation to urban planning. Modern sustainability talks about seven-generation thinking. The Maya lived it. Yet the starkest difference lies in how each culture treats endings. Linear time breeds a terror of collapse, hence our doomsday fascinations. But cyclical time teaches that endings fertilize new beginnings. When the Maya's classic period waned, they didn't vanish, they transformed, carrying forward knowledge into new eras. Today, as glaciers melt and species blink out, we're trapped in a progress narrative that can't imagine reinvention. The Maya's real prophecy wasn't about apocalypse, it was about showing how to let systems evolve without clinging to what's expired. Perhaps it's no coincidence that indigenous-led movements today, from Bolivia's living well philosophy to Maori land guardianship, echo this worldview. They remind us that sustainability isn't about green gadgets, but resetting our relationship with time itself. The Maya didn't need dystopian movies to imagine the future. They inscribed it in stone as a call and response across millennia. Their calendar's greatest secret, that survival isn't about racing forward. It's about learning to walk in sacred circles. The long count may have stolen the spotlight in 2012, but it was never meant to stand alone. Like celestial gears in a cosmic clock, the Maya wove multiple calendars together, each with its own sacred purpose. At the heart of this system danced two rhythmic partners, the practical 365-day Hob and the mystical 260-day Tzolk'in. Together, they formed a harmony more intricate than any modern timekeeping device. Picture the Hob as the Earth's steady heartbeat, 18 months of 20 days each, plus a fleeting 5-day period called Wayab. Farmers relied on this solar calendar like we rely on weather apps, timing maize planting to the return of rains and harvests to the dry season. But the Maya didn't just track days, they infused them with meaning. Each month had its patron deity and ritual significance. The month of Pop wasn't just January, it was a time for renewing household shrines, while Yaxkin marked the zenith of summer storms when priests performed ceremonies for crops. Even those ominous 5 Wayab days weren't feared, as our pop culture suggests they were a sacred limbo, a time for reflection and preparation, like the quiet breath before a plunge. Now imagine the Tzolk'in as time's sacred whisper, a 260-day cycle pulsing beneath the solar year's surface. This wasn't tied to seasons but to the human soul's rhythm. Every day carried unique energy named from 20-day signs, like jaguar, wind, or seed paired with 13 numbers. Think of it as a celestial bingo drum where each combination, say, 3 monkey or 7 reed, held specific divinatory power. A child born on 8 deer might be destined for leadership, while 4 rain could signal a healer's path. Daykeepers still use these readings today, consulting the Tzolk'in for everything from naming ceremonies to diagnosing illness. Here's where the magic happens. Every 52 years, the Hab and Tzolk'in complete a full synchrony, what scholars call the calendar round. Imagine two interlocking wheels, one with 365 teeth, the other with 260. They'd only realign perfectly once every 18,980 days, a span so significant that Maya cities celebrated it with monumental stelae and renewed fire ceremonies. This wasn't just math, it was theology in motion. The Dresden Codex even contains tables predicting these convergences centuries in advance, proving the Maya saw time as a symphony where celestial and sacred measures periodically harmonized. The practical brilliance shines through in artifacts like the murals at San Bartolo. Archaeologists found layers of painted dates showing how priests tracked both calendars simultaneously, solar months marked in red, Tzolk'in days in black. A farmer might plant corn when the Hab said, "Zok-kin, dry season," but only after checking the Tzolk'in for an auspicious day like 12 Mays. Even warfare followed this dual rhythm. Historical records show kings timed battles to coincide with both a Hab month of strength and a Tzolk'in day of victory. What modern planners could learn from this system? While we fragment time into isolated units, work schedules here, religious holidays there, the Maya integrated all dimensions. A single date might mean 18 Kumku on the Hab, 9 Ahor on the Tzolk'in, and 3 baktuns on the long count, each layer adding meaning like musical notes in a chord. The Hab grounded them in earthly cycles, the Tzolk'in connected them to spiritual currents, and the long count anchored them in cosmic time. Today's Maya communities still feel this interplay's pulse. In Guatemala's highlands, midwives record babies' birthdays in both Gregorian and Tzolk'in, believing the day sign shapes their destiny. Fishermen in Belize check the Hab for lobster seasons but consult daykeepers for the luckiest Tzolk'in dates to sail. Even urban Maya architects design buildings with solstice alignments from the Hab while incorporating Tzolk'in glyphs into decorative motifs. The calendars didn't vanish with antiquity, they evolved, proving that true timekeeping isn't about counting days but weaving them into life's fabric. Unlike our segmented planners where work, family, and faith occupy separate columns, the Maya's interlaced calendars remind us that time isn't fractured. The same sunrise can mark a farming deadline, a holy day, and a cosmic milestone. In that holistic vision lies their real prophecy, not an end of days, but an invitation to see time as the Maya did, not as a line rushing toward oblivion, but as a loom where every thread holds meaning. Imagine two colossal wheels turning at different speeds, one marking the sun's yearly journey, the other tracking sacred rhythms older than stone temples. Every 52 years, these wheels finally click into perfect alignment, completing what the Maya called the calendar round, a moment so significant entire cities pause to witness it. This wasn't just a quirk of math, it was the heartbeat of Mayan civilization, a celestial reunion that united the practical and the divine. The mechanics behind this convergence are staggering in their precision. The Hab, with its 365 days of 18 20-day months plus 5 ominous Wayab days, kept pace with the seasons. Meanwhile, the Tzolk'in's 260-day cycle, woven from 13 numbers and 20-day signs, orchestrated spiritual life. Like interlocking gears, these calendars only realigned perfectly once every 18,980 days, roughly 52 Hab years. Picture a vast cosmic clock where the hour and minute hands meet only once in a lifetime, signaling not just the passage of time, but its rebirth. When this synchrony arrived, the Maya didn't just note it in ledgers, they lived it. Archaeological evidence from sites like Tikal reveals towering stelae erected specifically to commemorate these junctures, their carvings depicting rulers clad in jaguar pelts and quetzal feathers, reenacting the dawn of creation. In the Dresden Codex, priests left tables predicting calendar rounds centuries ahead, ensuring no generation would miss this sacred appointment. The festivities weren't mere celebrations, they were acts of cosmic maintenance, rituals designed to keep the wheels of time turning smoothly. The heart of these ceremonies was the new fire ritual, a breathtaking spectacle that bound communities together. As the final night of the 52nd year darkened, priests extinguished every hearth and torch across the kingdom. Crowds gathered on hilltops, eyes fixed on the starry expanse where the Pleiades climbed toward zenith. If the stars aligned, proof the gods granted another cycle, a runner would kindle a flame using friction from a sacred drill, then sprint to relight bonfires in every plaza. The glow spreading from temple to home wasn't just practical, it symbolized time itself reigniting, carrying the promise of renewal into every household. What's astonishing is how deeply this 52-year rhythm permeated daily life. Farmers timed crop rotations to these cycles, knowing soil needed a calendar-round span to fully rejuvenate. Artisans sealed time capsule ceramic vessels filled with jade beads and maize kernels beneath temple floors, messages for future generations who'd unearth them in the next synchrony. Even architecture echoed this pattern. The Great Pyramid of Cholula was expanded in 52-year intervals, each layer a stone echo of the celestial clock. Modern scholars once dismissed the calendar round as primitive until they realized its genius. Unlike our linear calendars that stretch indefinitely forward, Mayan timekeeping created natural checkpoints, moments to reflect, rebuild, and recommit. In an era where we're drowning in infinite digital timelines, their system offered something radical: punctuation. The Maya understood that without meaningful pauses, time becomes a blur. Their 52-year reset wasn't just about tracking days, it was about remembering how to live them. Today, fragments of this wisdom survive where you'd least expect. In remote Guatemalan villages, elders still speak of tying the years, bundling 52-year periods like sacred firewood. Mexican towns celebrate Fuego Nuevo festivals with torch relays that mirror ancient rituals. Even our own fascination with milestone anniversaries, golden jubilees, centennials hints at this deep-seated need to mark time's grand cycles. The Maya didn't just invent a calendar, they crafted a philosophy, one that reminds us time isn't just something we measure, but something we're meant to feel. High above the jungle canopy, the Maya built silent stone sentinels that spoke the language of the stars. At sites like Chichen Itza and Capon, their observatories weren't just buildings, they were celestial computers, engineered to track planetary movements with jaw-dropping precision. The Caracol Tower in Belize, with its narrow slit windows perfectly aligned to Venus's extreme positions, reveals a sophistication that rivals modern planetariums. Unlike our reliance on digital apps, the Maya used architecture itself as their telescope, turning staircases into solar markers and temple doorways into cosmic crosshairs. Their mastery of Venus alone defies belief. The Dresden Codex contains a 584-day Venus cycle table accurate to just 2 hours, a feat requiring generations of naked eye observations. They knew Venus appeared as both morning and evening star, calculating its synodic period down to a fraction of a day. Kings timed coronations to its first appearance after inferior conjunction, believing the planet's rebirth mirrored their own divine authority. At Uxmal, the governor's palace aligns with Venus's southernmost rising, while murals at Mayapon depict warriors emulating the planet's cyclical conquest of the sun. This wasn't astrology, it was hard science encoded in stone. Eclipses held equal fascination. The Dresden Codex's eclipse table spans 33 pages, predicting lunar events with 98% accuracy across 58 years. Glyphs at Palenque describe a solar eclipse in 690 so precisely that modern astronomers confirm it occurred within 7 minutes of their recorded time. Their secret: the Maya recognized the Saros cycle, the roughly 18-year period between similar eclipses centuries before European astronomers documented it. Priests used these tables to stage dramatic rituals, defeating the eclipse monster with fire and noise to ensure the sun's return. But their celestial genius extended beyond grand events.
At Akansei, small holes drilled through temple walls cast pinpoint sunbeams that mark equinoxes on interior altars. In Oxkentok, the labyrinthine structure's corridors align with the Pleiades' zenith passage, signaling the start of the rainy season. Even their ball courts held astronomical secrets. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza's acoustics create echoes mimicking the Quetzal bird's call when the sun crosses zenith, blending sport, sound, and solstice into one sacred experience. What's most humbling is how they achieved all this without lenses or clocks. By stacking observations across centuries, carving data into stelae, painting it on codices, encoding it in pyramid steps, they built a living database of the cosmos. Modern planetarium software confirms their calculations often match our tech-driven results within margins of minutes. Their astronomy wasn't a sideshow to the calendar, it was the foundation. Where we see stars as distant lights, the Maya saw them as ancestors, teachers, and timekeepers, a celestial symphony they spent lifetimes learning to hear. The stone walls of Palenque first whispered their secrets in the 1800s, when explorers stumbled upon intricately carved stelae covered in strange, elegant symbols. To the untrained eye, these glyphs were mere decoration, but behind their swirling lines and animal motifs lay the world's most sophisticated ancient writing system, a code that would take over a century to crack. The story of how scholars deciphered the Mayan script reads like an intellectual detective novel, with breakthroughs coming not from a single Rosetta Stone moment, but through generations of painstaking collaboration across linguistics, archaeology, and even astronomy. Early attempts at translation were plagued by colonial bias. European scholars like Constantin Rafinesque correctly identified glyphs for numbers in the 1830s, but their work was overshadowed by figures like Diego de Landa, the same Spanish friar who burned Mayan books whose flawed alphabet based on forced indigenous comparisons sent research down dead ends for decades. The tide turned in the 1950s when Russian linguist Yuri Norisov made a revolutionary realization. Mayan writing wasn't purely alphabetic or pictographic, but a logosyllabic system blending sound symbols with meaningful images. His analysis of the Dresden Codex proved that a single glyph could represent both a concept like jaguar and a syllable like bar, unlocking the script's fluid duality. But the calendar's secrets didn't fully emerge until archaeology met epigraphy. At sites like Tikal and Kapon, researchers noticed glyph clusters repeating at fixed intervals patterns that matched known astronomical cycles. When matched to surviving codices, these sequences revealed the mechanics of the long count. A key breakthrough came in 1960 when Tatyana Proskoryakov noticed that stelae at Piedras Negras told linear stories of rulers' lives, complete with birth and death dates recorded in long count notation. Suddenly, stones once considered mere art became history books, their dates cross-verifiable with eclipse records and Venus tables, the real game changer. Modern technology, multispectral imaging has resurrected faded pigments in codices like the Grolier, once dismissed as a forgery but now confirmed as authentic pre-Columbian astronomy notes. LiDAR scans expose hidden glyphs beneath jungle canopies, while AI algorithms help correlate fragmented inscriptions across distant sites. In 2012, researchers at Boston University used 3D modeling to digitally unwrap a broken monument from El Achiotl, revealing a previously unknown calendar date, proof the Maya tracked time across millennia with obsessive precision. Yet some of the most vital translators aren't academics, they're contemporary Maya speakers. In highland Guatemala, elders like Manuel Stock collaborate with linguists to decode glyphs phonetically using surviving Mayan languages. A single chorte verb might explain a puzzling verb glyph. A Quechua folktale could illuminate a mythological scene. This living connection breathes humanity into the script, reminding us that these weren't abstract symbols, but the voices of poets, historians, and astronomers who saw time as a living tapestry.
The glyph's ultimate gift wasn't just confirming calendar mechanics, it was revealing how the Maya thought. Their inscriptions show no obsession with apocalypse, but rather a profound focus on continuity. A king's accession glyph often mirrors his ancestors from cycles prior, reinforcing time's cyclical nature. Eclipse warnings appear alongside agricultural notes, blending celestial and earthly rhythms. Even their end dates come paired with future projections, like the Temple of Inscriptions at Palenque, which references events in 4772 CE. What began as colonial erasure has become a testament to resilience. Each translated glyph is a reclaimed thread in a cultural fabric once torn by fire. Now, as scholars piece together more fragments, from market ledgers to love poems, we're not just reconstructing a calendar. We're learning to read time as the Maya did, not as a countdown, but as a conversation spanning generations. The Doomsday frenzy of 2012 didn't spread through ancient stone carvings or whispered prophecies. It exploded across smartphone screens and viral hashtags. Unlike previous apocalyptic scares confined by the slow burn of books or word of mouth, the internet transformed Mayan calendar myths into digital wildfire, spreading faster than facts could chase them. Consider how prophecies traveled before the digital age. The 1000 CE millennial panic took decades to ripple across Europe via handwritten sermons and traveling monks. Even the Y2K scare relied largely on newspaper headlines and televised warnings, but 2012's myths moved at the speed of Wi-Fi. A single YouTube video claiming NASA had confirmed Nibiru's approach could rack up millions of views overnight, while algorithms pushed apocalyptic content to anyone who clicked once on a doomsday post. Twitter birthed trending hashtags like #endtimes, and Facebook groups amassed hundreds of thousands of members trading bunker building tips. The scale was unprecedented. Google searches for Mayan apocalypse surged 1,200% in 2012, with spikes every time a celebrity like B.O. B tweeted about preparing for the end. What made this digital storm unique wasn't just its speed, it was the way misinformation mutated. Early internet forums like Above Top Secret spliced Mayan glyphs with rogue astrophysics, creating hybrid theories no ancient scribe would recognize. Reddit threads dissected grainy NASA leaks of phantom planets, while Instagram influencers monetized fear with sponsored posts about survival gear. The myth grew tentacles, claims about polar shifts, solar megastorms, and even dimensional ascension attached themselves to the Mayan calendar like barnacles on a ship. By December, the original prophecy barely resembled itself, now repackaged as a cosmic buffet of conspiracies, each more outlandish than the last. The psychology behind this viral spread reveals a darker truth. Studies analyzing 2012 social media found that false claims traveled 6 times faster than debunking articles, a pattern familiar from later crises like COVID misinformation. Humans aren't wired to resist sensationalism. Our brains light up for novelty and threat. A post-warning, the Maya knew something NASA won't tell you. Triggers dopamine hits that sober facts can't compete with. Platforms capitalized on this, prioritizing engagement over accuracy. Facebook's own internal research later showed its algorithm actively promoted apocalyptic content because fear kept users scrolling longer. Yet the digital age also birthed unexpected heroes. Indigenous Maya activists like Maria Teresa Cabal used Twitter to counter myths with threads translating actual stele inscriptions. Astronomers hosted live TikTok streams explaining why Nibiru couldn't exist. Wikipedia's 2012 phenomenon page became a battleground, with editors reverting doomsday edits over 50,000 times. Even Google took action by December 21st. Searches for Mayan apocalypse auto-completed to hoax. The legacy of 2012's digital frenzy lingers in today's misinformation landscape. It proved how easily ancient symbols could be weaponized as clickbait in the attention economy. but it also revealed cracks in the system, ordinary people learning to fact-check, platforms facing scrutiny over amplification of lies, and marginalized voices reclaiming narratives. The Maya's calendar survived colonial burning, now it withstood digital distortion. In the end, the viral apocalypse didn't end the world, just our innocence about how fast fiction can outpace truth when algorithms hold the matches. In a small village tucked between the misty highlands of Guatemala, a grandmother named Maria Ixcot stitches intricate patterns into a vibrant huipil, a traditional Mayan blouse. To the untrained eye, the swirling designs are simply beautiful artistry, but to Maria, each thread encodes sacred Tzolk'in dates, ancestral star maps, and the very rhythms of the earth. She's part of a quiet revolution sweeping through contemporary Maya communities, a movement to reclaim their calendar not as a relic or doomsday prop, but as a living compass guiding daily life. This revival isn't led by celebrity activists or viral influencers, but by farmers, weavers, and midwives who have safeguarded fragments of knowledge through centuries of upheaval. Take Tata Pedro Cruz, a daykeeper from Sololá who remembers learning the Tzolk'in as a child by counting kernels of maize laid out in sacred patterns. Today, he trains a new generation of Ajkajab spiritual guides using an unlikely tool, a solar-powered tablet loaded with digitized glyphs from the Dresden Codex. The calendar isn't in the past, he explains while adjusting his headset for a Zoom lesson with students in Mexico City. It's in the soil, in the storms, in the heartbeat of a child born today. Resisting commercialization has become its own act of defiance. At Chichen Itzá, where souvenir shops sell Mayan apocalypse T-shirts, Yucatec elder Feliciana Pech organizes silent solstice ceremonies at dawn before the tourist buses arrive. Her collective Kayenon Bej teaches visitors to read the real calendar glyphs etched into nearby monuments, contrasting them with Hollywood's distortions. They come for the end of the world, she laughs, pointing to a carving of the maize god's rebirth. We show them the beginning, the challenges are daunting. Climate change disrupts ancestral planting cycles tied to the hob, while evangelical churches denounce traditional timekeeping as heresy, yet innovations flourish. In Quetzaltenango, linguist Luis Enrique Sam Collop developed a smartphone app that converts Gregorian dates to Tzolk'in and hob, complete with audio pronunciations from elder speakers. Meanwhile, teenage girls in Nebaj record TikTok videos explaining how their woven belts encode baktun counts, a digital bridge between ancient math and Gen Z curiosity. Perhaps the most profound work happens in courtroom backrooms, where Maya lawyers like Andrea Ixchiu fight to protect calendar knowledge as intellectual property. In 2021, her team won a landmark case against a French cosmetics company that trademarked Tzolk'in day names for perfume lines. They wanted to own days that have belonged to our grandmothers since time began, she states, holding up legal filings adorned with century-old glyphs from community archives. What emerges isn't a fossilized tradition, but a dynamic dialogue. At the heart of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, young Maya architects are designing earthquake-resistant schools with classrooms aligned to solstice sunbeams, merging ancestral astronomy with modern engineering. In Guatemala City's bustling markets, vendors now tag prices in both quetzals and cacao beans, reviving the pre-Columbian barter system. Their apps sync with Tzolk'in market days. The true custodians of this wisdom often go unrecognized. Women like Bialam Kuwak, a midwife who still records births using a knotted cord tracking the 260-day Tzolk'in cycle, blending it with hospital paperwork. Or teachers in bilingual schools who sneak calendar math into government-approved curricula by framing it as art history. Their quiet persistence reveals the calendar's real power, not as a curiosity for outsiders, but as a compass for navigating an uncertain future while honoring an unbroken past. As the digital age accelerates, these keepers of time offer an unexpected gift, the reminder that some clocks don't tick, they breathe. In the hands of today's Maya, the calendar isn't counting down to anything. It's teaching us how to walk forward while staying rooted, how to innovate without erasing, and above all, how to listen to the stars, the soil, and the whispers of those who never stopped measuring time in sacred spirals. December 21st isn't just a footnote in history, it's a flashing billboard reminding us how brilliance gets twisted into myth. The Maya didn't carve their calendar to soundtrack Hollywood disaster scenes. They built a celestial clockwork so precise, modern astronomers still marvel at its engineering. That's the real legacy of this date, not an imagined apocalypse, but a civilization that mapped time with the same precision we reserve for quantum physics. Consider the irony. While tabloids screamed about planetary collisions, the actual Mayan inscriptions at Palenque quietly plotted astronomical events thousands of years beyond 2012, proof they envisioned time stretching forward like an unbroken highway. Their calendars didn't predict doom, they synchronized harvests with Venus cycles and aligned coronations with solstices. A farmer checking the hob could tell you when the rains would come within days, centuries before modern meteorology existed. That's not prophecy, it's science wrapped in sacred observation. Yet the deeper lesson here isn't just about Mayan genius, it's about how easily outsider panic can eclipse indigenous wisdom. Like a game of cultural telephone, their intricate cosmology got reduced to a doomsday meme. Spanish colonizers burned their codices as heresy. Then 2012 conspiracy theorists resurrected those ashes as clickbait. Both committed the same violence, repackaging a living knowledge system into crude caricatures that served their own agendas. This distortion isn't harmless. When we reduce ancient systems to sensational soundbites, we rob them, and ourselves, of their true gifts. The Maya's calendars weren't just timekeepers, they were ecological manuals teaching how to plant corn in rhythm with dry seasons and when to let fields lie fallow. Their apocalypse was actually a sustainability model, a reminder that all cycles renew. In an era of climate crisis, that's the wisdom we desperately need, buried under layers of misinterpretation. The date's modern power lies in its cautionary tale. December 21st forces us to confront how quickly fear overrides facts, how charismatic misinformation drowns out quiet scholarship. It's a mirror reflecting our own era's battles with fake news and cultural appropriation. But it's also an invitation to listen before projecting, to seek understanding before entertainment. Every time someone shares the real story of the Mayan calendar, they're not just correcting a myth. They're honoring a civilization that saw time as something to dance with, not dominate, a lesson that feels more urgent now than ever. What if we treated this date not as a punchline, but as a pivot point? A moment to replace Hollywood's fireballs with genuine awe for how the Maya tracked eclipses down to the minute without telescopes, or how their long count could sync with Gregorian dates centuries later. That shift from fear to fascination is how we transform cultural theft into cultural tribute. December 21st stopped being about the Maya's imaginary ending long ago. Now it's about whether we're brave enough to face our own beginnings, in how we honor, preserve, and finally hear the voices we've spent centuries drowning out. The Maya didn't carve their calendar to spark panic, they engineered it to celebrate cosmic order. What the world misinterpreted as a doomsday clock was actually humanity's most sophisticated ode to time's resilience. Every glyph, every alignment, every nested cycle was a love letter to the universe's enduring rhythm. This wasn't a civilization obsessed with endings, it was a culture that mapped the stars so precisely, their eclipse tables still outpace modern software. The real prophecy hidden in their calculations, that knowledge when rooted in reverence outlives empires. Consider the quiet brilliance of their legacy. While 2012's doomsday hype fizzled by sunrise, Mayan astronomers' actual predictions still hold. Their Venus charts, etched into bark paper codices centuries ago, remain 99.8% accurate. Their long count didn't just track years, it wove together solar cycles, sacred mathematics, and agricultural wisdom into a tapestry so sturdy, it survived book burnings and Hollywood distortions. That's not mysticism, it's masterful science draped in spiritual poetry. The calendar's true purpose wasn't to warn, it was to witness, to remind us that civilizations flourish when they align with nature's cadence, not fight against it. Modern farmers in Guatemala's highlands still plant by the hob, yielding harvests that defy climate volatility. Midwives consult the Tzolk'in for birth charts, blending millennia-old star wisdom with modern medicine. These aren't relics, they're living proof that indigenous science holds keys to our survival. So where do we go from here? The invitation isn't to romanticize the Maya, but to listen. To swap sensationalism for curiosity, whether that's diving into the Dresden Codex's real eclipse algorithms or supporting contemporary Maya scholars reclaiming their heritage. Their calendar wasn't a crystal ball, it was a mirror reflecting back our own relationship with time, chaos, and the stories we tell to make sense of both. As the next Baktun unfolds, let's honor their legacy by seeking wisdom over wildfire myths. Press that subscribe button to join us as we keep unraveling history's tangled threads where every apocalypse is just someone's misunderstood beginning. The Maya didn't count down to oblivion, they charted a path through it, and that's a story worth